In this video, I'm going to create a radio station calendar. Now, when we're in the routine of thinking about the things that we've got to do today and tomorrow and maybe next week, we might not always consider the things that are quite a bit further in the future. So publishers, podcasters and creators might already have a content calendar or an editorial calendar, and we can certainly create one of those as well. But the idea of this calendar is to just capture events at a high level, both that are opportunities, things that we can do with content and sponsorship and so on, but also operational considerations. So those more nitty-gritty things of running a radio station, where it would help if we were just thinking about those a little bit further in advance. So it's not intended to be shared really outside of the station. So this is something we would use either ourselves as individuals or as a team. So it's different to a community calendar or an events diary, which you might have on a website. It's also not really for show prep. It's really just for creating and tracking those things internally. So this is really hopefully going to help us get all these different ideas and events, get them out of our mind into a calendar so that the whole team can see them and start thinking about them. So I'm going to create this calendar using Google Calendar. If you use Google Workspace as a team, or Microsoft 365 or Zoho Mail or something similar, you could create it there. If you don't have something like that, but everybody on the team has a Gmail account, maybe create it in Google Calendar and then just share it with those individuals and their Gmail accounts, their Google accounts, and then they can access it that way. So I won't be making the calendar public or sharing a URL. I would share it out that way. And there are lots of great tools that we can use for planning, and you may use one yourself already. But the good thing about a Google Calendar is that for your team members who only ever use their iPad, who do everything in native apps on Windows, it means there's a good chance of getting them on board, of getting buy-in from the team, and it is something they would actually look at and use. So there are lots of different categories of events that I'm going to talk about, but I think that we will just go through them as we start adding things to the calendar. We'll look at them that way and talk about the different opportunities and operational things. So the first category of events that I want to look at is national events and things that are like public holidays, national days. I'm in England, so things like bank holidays, Christmas, Easter, and if you're not sure where to get a list of those, you can just go to the gov.uk website. So we'll do a search for gov.uk bank holidays, and there is a page with those. So England and Wales, I'm recording this on the 3rd of January, the next one will be Good Friday on the 3rd of April, and I think I've already popped that in the calendar. And it is as simple as coming through, having that event, creating that new event there, and then that's in the calendar. So I've put these in a new calendar that I've created on the left hand side here. You can do that in Google by clicking the plus sign to add a calendar. I've called it Station Calendar and made the colour green, and then that's the calendar that I'm going to be sharing. So not my calendar, it's going to be this new one. The other thing to consider is that Google does give you this holidays in the United Kingdom calendar, and you can get the same for France and for Ireland and other countries. But I quite like having everything in one calendar, and then we make sure that all of the events are in one place. So a good reason for putting in things like bank holidays is that we can maybe thinking about, are there any content opportunities on that day? Will there be any events going on? Farmers markets, for example, that's always on a bank holiday. That's the sort of thing we could check up on. But also operationally. So if we're a community radio station, is it going to affect the availability of volunteers? Just gets those things in early, start thinking about them in plenty of time. And then we have significant national days that are not public holidays. So I would have a list like Halloween, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. On the content side, you can be thinking about maybe other things that we can do with sponsorship and advertising. Things like sponsorship with restaurants, florists, gift shops, things like that. You know, all these different things we can think of. And also some people might take Mother's Day off. So some people might say, I'm not coming in on Mother's Day. And then that's where we need to think about, again, cover. Is that show going to be voice tracked? Does that affect anything? And it means we can contact presenters a few weeks in advance. Will you be in on Mother's Day? And really make sure that that's all arranged. So I noticed in my calendar, I've put Mother's Day in on the wrong day. I've put it in on the 30th of March, a Monday, which it clearly isn't. So there is a really good website called Time and Date, and we can get a list of days on there. So let's go to Time and Date, UK days. We'll go to the calendar, scroll down, and Mother's Day is on the 15th of March. So let's move that into the correct place just by clicking and dragging it, popping it up there. Another one would be Guy Fawkes Day. I will mention that in a little bit with, more local events. So other significant days we might want to think about, things like World Book Day, International Women's Day, Macmillan Coffee Morning, days that are organised by charities for awareness. Are there any opportunities there for interviews, for outside broadcasts, calls for listeners to get in touch, all sorts of things that we can be doing around those days as well. You might want to also think about specific local observances, things like an annual memorial, a significant date locally that should be marked, religious observances as well. And then finally in this category I would put things like school holidays, so half term, Easter, Christmas, summer. Again, a list of those is available at gov.uk, school holidays. And the list isn't actually on gov.uk, but if you put in the postcode there, find your local council, it will take you almost to the list where you can access those dates for your area. So again, are there going to be any things happening locally? Are any football clubs going to be doing special training sessions for school-aged children in half term? Is that something that you can maybe do an interview? Is there maybe an opportunity in the weeks leading up to it for a little bit of advertising to let parents know that this is going to be happening? Those sorts of considerations. But also on the other side, operationally, is everybody going to be available? Are people going to be away? Are people not going to come into the studio during half term? If we can see that it's a couple of weeks away, we can just check in with people and again just make sure that we've got it worked out what's going to be happening over that school holiday. So I've put that in the when is it? I think it's in February, isn't it? Yeah. So for me locally, it'll be the 16th to the 20th, and I've just put that in to cover those days there. The next category of event that I want to talk about is local events. So these are popular big local events in our community with the potential for content and advertising. And I would say things like Christmas light switch-ons, music festivals, fireworks displays, county shows, fire station open days, emergency service days, those sorts of things, Christmas carols and concerts. Maybe you have really significant local events. We know of things like New Year's Day swims, cheese rolling. Maybe you have one of those locally that you could be doing something with as well. So there's opportunity to do a bit of advertising with those. Maybe it's an outside broadcast. Maybe it's something you can get online content. From experience, I know that if you look at the analytics of a radio station website that has had a page or an events diary listing for fireworks displays and Christmas light switch-ons, you always get a huge spike of traffic in the days coming up to that. And even if you haven't put on this year's one, maybe there isn't going to be a big fireworks display this year, the traffic you get to last year's and the years before can be really big. So that's where I would be thinking, okay, let's get a list together of all of the Christmas light switch-ons in our area, in the villages and towns. Let's do the same with fireworks. Let's get that as articles online. Let's get that as social media content. Let's update last year's and any previous events to say, this is the old event. Click here to see the event for 2026. Things like that. So by planning ahead, we can really get in front of these things rather than the week after the fireworks displays, looking at our analytics, seeing a big spike of content, big spike of traffic rather, and not having the content there for it. So these are the reasons for having these in the calendar. So I will just pop one in the calendar. I think I've done it already actually in May. So let's say we have a street food market. That's, 4 or 5 months away, but we'll get that in there and we could be thinking, let's get in touch with them. Will they have a budget for advertising? Let's see if we can start talking to them, get something arranged now. If they've not made decisions yet, let's check in a month's time rather than leaving it to a week or 2 weeks in advance. And then, maybe we're doing outside broadcast and they say, well, all the stores have gone. It's all done and dusted now, really. So yeah, it's worth getting all these things in the calendar. There can be events that are not really large events, but that we can't be a part of at all. So you get big events, things like music festivals, where they've partnered with a newspaper or partnered with a radio station, and really you don't have any in. You don't have any access to anything that's happening on the day. They don't want to do any advertising for the event, but it can still affect our listeners. So our listeners might be coming to us for traffic and travel information, for example. And we can keep listeners informed with road closures, delays on the roads, things happening with trains. Maybe if the trains are going to be really busy, our buses on diversion, things like that. The really, nitty gritty, useful, important information that affects our listeners that the station they've partnered with, especially if it's a regional or national station, might not mention at all. So it's something we have an opportunity to do there. So that's the sort of thing I'd be looking far ahead. Is that, period of time, let's say that it's a Sunday. Do we have a lot of pre-recorded and voice track shows on a Sunday? Can someone be available just to drop in traffic and travel around the commercial breaks, around the news and weather? Really just to make sure that when listeners do come to us for that information, that we have something there for them. So again, I would just say, let's say there was a big music festival in June. I think I've already popped that in. Big music festival there over that weekend. Just thinking a bit further ahead, once we get into June, okay, let's see, have we got someone available, just to make sure that we're keeping up with that sort of stuff, monitoring things and getting that in there. Another category of event I would look at is what I would call big events coming to town. So sometimes you can have a really big event come to your area. It could be like a championship or something like that at a local venue. And again, is it something where you need to think a little bit further in advance about? For example, if you have a good relationship with a venue or a team that plays at that venue, but this championship is organised by a big association and you need media accreditation, and that accreditation is going to open and close, you have to get in there and get that organised. So normally you would just contact someone you would have a contact, but here you need actually to make sure that you've got a pass, you've got permission, you can do all of those things. So that's something we'd want to consider. And even if we have no access whatsoever, it could be something, if we have a tea making championship coming to town and it's all been sewn up by University Radio Norwich, we can't do anything, then let's see, can we do other things locally? Maybe we can be talking to local people. So if there's a heightened level of interest in something, can we be letting our listeners know where there's opportunities to get involved, where they can learn about that all year round? And things like that. So if we were in Sheffield and the World Snooker Championships is coming to town or coming to the city, then can we think, okay, let's do something with the local snooker clubs. So when people are thinking about the snooker, we have some content around that, and we can let local people know this is how you can get involved in that sport. So finding opportunities like that, we would put that in the calendar as well. The next category I would think about is what I would call news and sport. So there are some opportunities here, of course, for content and finding stories to cover, but this is where we start to think more about operational things. So I would be thinking about elections in particular. Let's get that in the calendar. Are there going to be elections, and is everybody up to date with any rules that apply? So if we're a community radio station in the UK, is everybody completely aware of the Ofcom rules surrounding elections? And we're all up to date on training and things like that. So let's say that the elections, if we were going to have local elections on the 7th of May, I would pop those in there, just click on the date, and we'll just put in local elections. And then do just double check when you're creating these events that you have selected station calendar, whatever you've called your calendar, and that you're not adding events into your personal calendar. So it's as simple as creating an event, press save, and pop that in there. So we want to be thinking about candidates, just get a refresher on the rules, working backwards from May the 7th, if that was the date. So okay, when does the pre-election period start? When have we got to make sure that we're prepared for it? And we know an actual date for when we need to be, making sure that those rules are all applied and observed correctly. Things like that. Also with news and sport, you might want to schedule interviews across the year with local representatives. In my experience, you have some councillors county councillors, town councillors. They'll email you, they'll send you a Facebook message, they'll be doing something, can you come down and interview me about it? There's going to be a photo opportunity, we're organising a petition, and you'll have some representatives that get in touch quite a bit. The same for MPs as well, actually. They'll send emails to say that this MP is campaigning on this local issue, can they come in and do something? And you'll have other representatives you never hear from at all, ever. And you maybe have to work a little bit harder to chase them, to follow them up, to interview them, find out what they're working on. If you want to get like a broad representation, you want to make sure that all of the areas in your patch have been covered. You're not leaving out an area because their councillor never comes and talks to you about anything. These are just considerations. I'm not a journalist. You'll have your own experience of organising these sorts of things. But it's something that I would get in the diary, because sometimes the weeks and months can go past and you think, wow, it's a really long time since we've spoken to that person. And it might be something that a calendar can just be helpful in jogging your memory. If we have 12 county councillors in our patch, maybe one a month, we want to make sure we have, a good, even representation. There might be significant dates for local sports teams. So if your local football team is in the FA Cup or the FA Vase, when is their first match? After that match, let's just double check that we have the score for it, and we look at when is the draw going to be for the next match. Sometimes that draw happens on the radio, and you might put a date in the diary. Okay, I need to listen to this radio station because that's when we know who our local team is going to face next. And that's something useful that we can then hear that and then pass it on to our listeners. So all these sorts of things that we can just be keeping an eye on and sort of making sure we know that these are coming up, that we're aware of things. There's of course lots of other opportunities with news and sport, but I think it really depends on your local patch, and you'll have ideas, I'm sure, of things that you could be covering as well. The regulatory category is the next one I would think about, and we might be used to someone at a station of receiving letters and emails, reminders. You need to file this, you need to file a tax return, you're going to need to pay this bill for renewing your license, which is all great. But I think if we get all of this stuff in the diary, we can really make sure we're expecting it. And there's a few reasons for that. One I would say with things where we expect to get a notification is sometimes they don't arrive. It might go to spam. It might just never turn up. And then the next thing we know, we get a letter or we get an email to say, you didn't pay your fee on time and you could be in breach of your license, things like that. So get all of these in the diary, and it's good for budgeting as well. We can see a little bit further ahead. Okay, we're going to need £100 to renew that license. We're going to need to make sure that we've got our accounts ready to be filed by this deadline. So let's get all of these things organised. It can also help as well if that's something that's normally dealt with by somebody like your company secretary. Maybe they're going on a cruise for a couple of weeks. Maybe someone is ill and they're taking some time away from the station, and they normally receive these emails and notifications. Let's just make sure, okay, if we know that that person's not going to be available, but while they're not available, this deadline is going to fall. Let's make sure that we're ready and organised to make sure that that payment can be made, that thing can be filed, that paperwork, things like that. With Ofcom, and this is a non-exhaustive list, you really do need to make sure that you're aware of all of the Ofcom, if that's your regulator, and company and charity related dates, so that if there is something that comes in, you know about it. But for Ofcom, let's say you're a community radio station on FM and small scale DAB, I would be thinking annual licence fees. Is the SSDAB fee separate? Let's say that your FM is in March, for example, but you went on SSDAB in October. Don't forget the SSDAB can come separately, and you could have those two payments, and you've never really had to think about it for 10 years, but this is something that can come along. Provision of information. If you get asked to do something like a community radio finance report, are you going to be ready to do that? Community radio fund. Do you need to do a report for a grant you've had? Is there a deadline for spending the funds? Is the grant application window going to open and you want to go for it? Things like that. Get all of those in the calendar, and things like insurance renewal dates as well. So as I say, normally you get a letter or you get an email or you get something come through for those. If it doesn't arrive, I would want that in my calendar so I can think, right, I was expecting a bill by now from Ofcom. I've heard nothing. I'm going to make sure that I contact them before I think the deadline is. And they might say, okay, yeah, we've not sent the bills yet. The bills are coming, don't worry about it. But they might say, yes, that's going to be due next week. And we can get that done, and we can avoid hopefully any question of getting in breach or anything like that. The next thing I would think about is contracts and services. So there are always, things that we have running, maybe on an annual basis. Maybe we have a smartphone app, maybe we have streaming, like I've said before, insurance, maybe we have a news provider, and we're thinking, okay, when that comes up for renewal, we want to change provider, we want to do something different. We're going to need to get quotes, we're going to need to see how long is it going to take to switch over, things like that. So we might say, okay, our news service renews, and let's say that it renews on the 14th of January, the 14th of July, just for example. So let's pop that in the calendar, and then all the time we can be looking ahead to that and thinking about that. And we're not going to get to a meeting in the first week of July and someone's going to say, oh, by the way, are we going to carry on for another year with that news provider because that renews next week? And we haven't left ourselves any time for organising a contract, for training presenters, for training journalists, equipment, play out, any of that. We're not going to have time. We're going to have to renew it for another year. So by getting these in the calendar, again, it's just going to give us that little bit more time ahead to think about these things. Now, funding and grants is such an important category of events, I think, to put in a calendar like this. And it's essential if you're a community radio station, a hospital radio station, maybe even student radio and other non-profit groups. Often these funds have a window, a period of time when they accept applications. That period of time comes to an end, and then they consider the applications and then they allocate the funding. So I would definitely be looking ahead the whole year, finding those different funds when they're going to be open, popping those events in the calendar, and you can make sure that as those events approach, as those dates approach, you could be thinking about the priorities for that fund, thinking about your application, what could you apply for, making sure you get quotes if you need to get a quote for work or equipment or something like that, maybe asking questions. So when the fund opens, get in touch, is this something you would fund, different things like that. So well worth doing that so that you're not missing out on these different funds. A big one is local councils and local councillors having member budgets or local budgets. So this is where councillors, maybe on a county council, have a small pot of money that they can spend with local causes, and you can go along and speak to your local council and say, this is a project we would like to do, or this is a piece of equipment we need. Can we maybe access some funding for that? If you've spoken to councillors, they might tell you, I've spent all my money for this year, but come back and see me next year. Let's have a chat about it and let's see if we can do something. Find out when it is next year, because I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to councillors and it is the case that all of their funding has been allocated for this year, but let's have a chat next year. So let's get in, make sure we are right early with that. An election can affect that, so do just be aware of that as well. And you might find that with a local organisation, maybe like a college or a university, they might do advertising for open days and open evenings, for things like exam results, advertising how well their students have done. You might find that they say, well, we've allocated all of our budget this year. It's going on newspapers and social media advertising and other things. But yeah, maybe next year, let's have a chat about it. And again, I would just, find out if you can, when they do have their new budget, when they start thinking and start planning their media, seeing can you get in there and come up with something if that's possible as well. So let's say we're going to go for a local fund that's open for applications from the 1st to the 21st of August, and we'll jump through here. So we could say that the local grant open, and we could go from the 1st of August all the way through to the 15th. But what that's going to do is create, this, as you can see here, over a couple of lines of our monthly view of the calendar. And once you've got a couple of those in there, that can really start cluttering things up and pushing things out of view. So I might say, okay, it opens, let's just say local grant open on that date, and local grant closes on that date. And as I think I mentioned before, station calendar highlighted here. We want to make sure we're putting things into the station calendar all the time and not letting events pop into our personal calendar. So now when I'm looking at August, I can see, okay, that grant is going to open, that grant is going to close. And of course, you'll give it a more meaningful name as it relates to your local grants. And the final category that I'm going to talk about is maintenance. And this is something that can really get away from us if we're really concentrating on what we're doing today, tomorrow, next week, maybe next month, thinking about those big things, outside broadcasts, competitions, things like that. We can really forget about things that just have to be done. Things like PAT testing. They might be things that are required by a landlord. Maybe if you're in a serviced office space and they require that you give them your paperwork, what you've done, that you've got things organised, that you've done PAT testing, things like that, it's all on record, then these are the sorts of things, it's brilliant to just have them all up to date. And then if a landlord comes to you and says, have you done all your PAT testing? We need to see that. You can go, yes, we did it last week, here it is, and not keep getting chased for things. So you're not on the back foot, you're not thinking, right, now I've got all these things going on, but now I've got to organise PAT testing and that's going to be disruptive. Let's make sure that we're up to date on everything like that. Things like preventative maintenance of equipment. Is there anything you can do with that? Inspection of transmitters, antennas and structures. Looking at those things. Time can fly really quickly between going and visiting your transmitter, especially if it's not that accessible. You need to organise access. With a building owner or a farmer or a caretaker, you need to arrange ahead of time to go up and look at it. So maybe you do need to make sure you get that in the calendar. I've put that in my calendar just for early in the year for February. So TX inspection due. That's something maybe we can go up there. Just check everything's okay visually. Make sure that there's no little lights lit up for alarm on anything. Making sure that if there's fans, they're not full of dust. Just that basic visual stuff, and we can see, okay, that looks like that could be a problem. That fan in the transmitter is suddenly extremely loud. Let's contact our transmitter company and see if we can get that serviced, see if we can get a replacement fan. All those little bits and pieces just before that you go off air, before you have a big problem, before someone gets in touch with you and says, by the way, there seems to be a problem, something's loose on the transmitter, on the antenna rather, on your structure, something doesn't look right, and then you're on the back foot. And it will always happen at Christmas or during snow or on a bank holiday weekend. So make sure that you've got that preventative maintenance scheduled in, and you just set aside a little bit of time for doing that. And something like TX inspection, transmitter inspection, maybe you do that every 6 months on the 10th of February and 10th of July, 10th of August, something like that. So those are the categories of events, and you can see on the screen I've started to put a few more things in. I've got a farmers market in there, public liability insurance due for renewal on the 6th of February, and you can really just build up this list of events in the calendar. Just to finish off then, a few things, once we've created the calendar, we want to make sure that it's shared with team members. You will have some of the team who will probably engage, add their own events, add little notes to events, just to, really contribute to it. I think you'll probably have some team members that don't engage with it, don't look at it. So something I would bear in mind is that I wouldn't rely on it 100% to let everybody know what's going on. So if it's something like an outside broadcast, if it's something like maintenance, if there's something going on, brilliant to have it in the calendar because it's good for planning ahead and everybody can see it if they want to, but I wouldn't rely on it 100%. And then someone says, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that was going to affect my show. Well, make sure you get in touch with people. If you do that already by phone, by email, by some sort of internal messaging group, something like that, we carry on doing that. So this is a great planning tool, but I wouldn't rely on it to assume that everybody has seen it. I think it's probably worth agreeing how events are going to be actioned. So if you've got something in there, like Valentine's Day, which we have there on the 14th of February, I wouldn't, try and come up with an arrangement. So you don't want 2 or 3 people all seeing it's Valentine's Day and then all going off on their own to say, right, I'm going to go and contact all the florists. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this on my show. I'm going to invite this from listeners. I would really try and make sure that, okay, if that's there, start a thread somewhere, an email chain. Maybe if you're using a messaging app and you can create a thread, a separate group for Valentine's Day where you can all get involved and organise things, then I think that would help, just avoid any duplication and disagreements as well. And then, of course, keep the calendar up to date. So some of these things, they will be on the same day every year. Things like our transmitter inspection, if we always do it on the 10th of February, that's our deadline for that. Just set that to renew every year so we don't have to keep putting it in each year. And you can go as far ahead as you like. I'm doing this at the start of January, but if you think about doing this in April, just start from April or May and go through till Christmas, or go through until the early part of next year, so that you've always got that, doing it either as a sort of an ongoing, recurring thing every week or every month you update the calendar, or maybe just do it at the end of the year. And it's a nice project at the start of the year, start of a new year, to be thinking about everything that might be coming up. And of course, as things get announced, as events get announced, you can add them into the calendar. Maybe new grant funds become available and you can add them into the calendar. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know it is a little bit long and a little bit dry compared to some of the things that are coming up on the channel, but it is just a really useful thing to do. Just put aside a little bit of time to do it. If you can think of any events I've not mentioned, please do pop them in a comment. I would love to hear about those. And thanks again for watching this video.